Masterclass number 2, Driving Innovation Through AI-Powered Operation Workflows. I'm Brad Brachocki. I am your product marketing manager from Conga, really specialize in our document generation, e-signature solutions, and really providing your full revenue lifecycle solutions across your line of business. I am here with a wide variety of subject matter experts. With me, I have Suman, David, and Anthony. They're going to introduce themselves in a second, but all of them have very different backgrounds, and hopefully we can have a really great discussion today about what AI and other automation tools can do to really help power these workflows for banks and other financial institutions. So Anthony, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a bit about your background?
No problem. I was coached to keep it brief. My name is Anthony Baer. I now run the financial services segment for Conga's strategic business. I've been doing this a long time, almost 20 years, and I'm grateful to meet everybody. Thank you for your time.
How about you, David?
Sure. Hey, everybody. Really looking forward to the next hour. My name is David Rose. I'm out of Atlanta. I work for AWS. I'm a principal in the Gen AI and financial services kind of intersection. Worked in the industry for 30 years, including pretty long stints at McKinsey, Deloitte, Fiserv, and a couple others. So happy to be here.
Thank you. And Suman, last but not least.
Hey, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Suman here, based in Southern California, with Cognizant, and I run the technology office for the banking and the financial services segment within Cognizant. And we focus on, how we can help, leverage technology to drive customer outcomes. So looking forward to the conversation today, everyone. Back to you, Brian.
Thank you. And thanks everyone for being here. We really appreciate it. As a reminder, this is our second webinar in our series. We had a webinar a few weeks ago on really highlighting the revenue advantage, your revenue friction zone, and how automating document automation and document start your process can help your business gain a revenue advantage. We have a recording of that. We had Doug and Preston from CFA and Pellegrini Financial alongside to give some of their insights as well. And if you're interested, we dropped a link to that recording in the recap so you can get caught up. But let's dive into our topic. As a reminder, if you stick around to the end, we're going to show you some calculations of really some ROI impact of implementing document automation into your AI workflows and more. But today, let's start to dive into AI. So this session is around that rapid adoption of digital and AI technology in your financial services sector. And there's really a wide variety of ways that banks are already leveraging AI technology. Here are just a few examples. For example, you might experience, implementing AI in cybersecurity, conversational chatbots, data analytics, compliance. It will be a big topic for today, fraud detection, advising, document automation, which will be a subject as well, and then tracking trends. So lots of different ways. And a lot of people are saying, I know AI is buzzworthy. I know I need to invest in it. Where do I start? So really, David, as someone who has this extensive background in both banking and with your expertise in machine learning and AI, where have you seen the most banks adopt AI so far?
Yeah, it's an interesting phenomenon because we see AI affecting financial institutions in really a couple different ways. One, I would say, kind of improving what they were already doing, and the other is enabling new business models or new apps or new products and services within the financial institution. So if I think about how AI can improve things, you think about the underlying models improving for like credit risk management or fraud detection or even marketing and personalization. These are areas that have been around for as long as banking, nearly. But we're going to see kind of these continuing to improve in kind of accuracy, implementation ease, etc. And on the other side, on the newer side, which we'll talk more about later, certainly can't overlook Gen AI and the role going forward of LLMs and things like RAG, retrieval augmented generation. Those are going to enable kind of this new breed. We'll talk a little bit about it today. Like you'll hear me talk about Amazon Q, for example, which is Amazon's or AWS's AI assistant, right? And we'll talk a little bit about kind of what that means and why those things, are important and what they could do going forward. But those are kind of how I would view the opportunity. So improve what you're doing today already, plus begin to layer on kind of new capabilities as one gains more experience with the technology and AI.
Absolutely. Thank you. And so what about you, Suman? Like, so you work in a very technical role. Where are you seeing AI make the most impact for banks and those who've implemented machine learning capabilities into their firm so far?
Yeah, I think, we are seeing, most of the enterprises that we work with today are in the initial stages of what we call the AI adoption. We see this, the banks to adopt this in the next 10 to 15 years, and roughly, around 15% of the organizations to be adopting Gen AI in the next 3 to 4 years, right? And what we see in this phase, our customers experimenting with the Gen AI use cases, which are manageable in scope with some defined outcomes. For example, improve the efficiency of a particular, process, or, drive some specific outcomes, but which are also, manageable in risk in terms of low risk outcomes, because I think, there are regulatory implications and compliance regulations which customers are thinking of. So I think, we are seeing this getting adopted across the spectrum. And, we are seeing three areas where customers are leveraging the Gen AI, right? In terms of, the customer journeys. For example, the personalization. When a user logs into the bank, can it make recommendations in terms of what products it can recommend, right? The other is, we see them getting adopted in the process side of it. For example, any of the originations process, the middle office areas, and finally the back office operations, right? And the functions. And we are seeing some examples. We did a recent scan of, what is happening across the BFS industry. For example, we are seeing some banks, roll out AI-driven, virtual assistants, which is improving the overall customer experience. So, these assistants can, even respond to the customer requests, right? For example, it comes in, what type of product or mortgage should I select? It can make some recommendations. And lastly, the other use cases that we are seeing is across horizontally on the back office side with the technology operations, where we are seeing the developers use the Gen AI tools to drive the productivity of their software velocity, right? And we are seeing almost around 20 to 30% increase on those kind of use cases. So we are seeing, an adoption and use cases across the whole spectrum of this.
Yeah, it's really, really interesting. And it's nice to see all these different perspectives from kind of all of your different backgrounds. And Anthony, you have the sales hat on. Tell us, like, from a sales perspective, as people are buying and or selling AI, like what are you seeing from your point of view?
I think from my lens, somebody who's been around the block a long time, is that AI has changed the context of who we're having conversations with. Historically, technology sales would be oriented towards the office of the CIO or the CTO, with a subset of business stakeholders being what I'll call influencers, but not key decision makers. I think especially in financial services, from my team, we're seeing that dynamic shift where now the chief legal officer, the chief procurement officer are no longer influencers. They're economic buyers, they're project owners. They care a lot about themselves, the ability to manage and mitigate risk and exposure, to unlock opportunity, to be regulatory compliant. And for us as a sales organization, it calls on us not only to speak to those use cases and requirements, but also to do so in a way that's very non-technical. I think the game-changing context of AI is to, through technology that's very, very complicated, be very simple and matter of fact in how we message to the business.
100%. And it's, with all these different lenses, it's no surprise that all these organizations have already been adopting AI. As you see here, it just popped up. McKinsey estimates that AI could potentially deliver up to $1 trillion of additional value per year. And Business Insider, as you can see, shared that aggregate potential of cost savings for banks was estimated around $447 billion in 2023. And really, these FinServ experts are predicting this high adoption of AI throughout banking. But with all good things also come with risk. So we talked about a lot of the positives, a lot of the benefits. Let's discuss some of the challenges that firms should be aware of. So AI in general, being adopted at this rapid pace. What about these challenges? So, Suman, you talked earlier about a lot of the benefits of machine learning and other things, but what are some of the big warning signs you see, and how can people establish these preventative measures against them?
No, that's a very important point, Brad. I think, as the AI is getting rolled out and we see organizations adopting to scale with the AI, we conducted a recent study jointly with Oxford Economics, and the numbers tell a very similar story. What we are seeing is, in the next 10 years, the technology could inject, an annual value of almost $1 trillion, right? And if the adoption of the AI is on the higher side. Now, to put this in perspective, $1 trillion is like almost half of the loans originated in the US in 2023, right? That's the kind of numbers we are looking at. But fundamentally, we expect as organizations adopt this, which we think nearly around 50% of the businesses are going to adopt Gen AI in the next 10 years. I think for the adoption to succeed at scale, I think there are two things that we feel are fundamentally important. One is how do you ensure the data privacy and the security around accessing the data and how the large language models are processing it, right? For example, you are using the foundational models to improve the productivity or the efficiency, but then you're storing the sensitive data. So I think it's important to, define the guardrails around which, the data will be accessed and how it will be used, along with the security policies that every organization has in line with, what the security policies should be. Secondly, the regulations are still being shaped in terms of Gen AI, because in terms of accountability and the transparency, it still needs to be set. And the foundational principles need to align with what the future policies could be. We do have some regulations around the GDPR, the CCPA, but I think, the AI makers need to think as to how they will comply with the future regulations that might still come up, right? So I think the security remains a key aspect of it. The other thing, which we often should not be, brushing aside is the people aspect of it, So if you look at, for example, the microprocessors, it was launched in the 70s, but then it took 20 years for it to get adopted, right? It took almost 20 years. So I think, as for the technology to adopt at scale, people have to embrace it without fear, right? And, in the past, if you look at the automations that has happened, it has largely impacted manual labor. But today, with the advancement in Gen AI, this will impact the knowledge workers, right? And it's different this time. For example, a HVAC technician may not see an impact on their job at all, right? With the advancement of Gen AI. But for example, a software developer, a loan processor could see some impact on how they are working with Gen AI. So I think, it is important that, we work with the users to help them understand and create the trust and the transparency to be able to so that the users are able to use the technology in the right way. They are using it to augment their skills as well as the productivity, so that you can drive the adoption to a faster extent, right? And with this comes the immense work around how do you also reskill people. So I think these are the two important aspects we are seeing in terms of ensuring that AI gets adopted at scale in the organizations.
Absolutely, 100%. Anthony, what about your perspective?
I think, and I'll speak to the audience, any project in an organization requires sponsorship and advocacy from executives. And I think, AI by itself is never just going to get that. So to me, these technologies need to be applied to real business problems. And some of those business problems that we see resonate, address bottom line costs. I think, by and large, like most institutions, companies do not believe that AI is going to incrementally grow top line revenue. But there is a real belief that, for example, within a portfolio of billions of dollars of expenditures and hundreds of thousands of contracts, AI can quickly determine where risk and exposure exists, where non-compliance exists, where missed opportunity or better negotiations can occur. I think there's a real belief that in engaging customers, AI can provide control and governance. A great example is, as an investor, I can request real-time access to my statement of portfolio and funds. That calls systems to draw data, but to be regulatory compliant, I must know that not only did you ask for the statement, but I delivered it to you and you received it. All of that workflow needs to be time-stamped. I think there's a belief that AI can do that. And so for me, kind of, as I said before, the goal for our team is to simplify what is very, very complicated and tie it to use cases that executives can understand.
Thank you. Absolutely. And David, anything else to add to what Anthony and Simona said so far?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think the other folks covered really well the potential upside and the benefits. I also tend to focus a lot on kind of the on the risk side of AI, not only kind of the technical risk of models and kind of outputs, but also how do we kind of build in things like controls for what can and can't be used as data in the models. How do we maintain traceability and lineage to all of the data? I think the folks on the call that do loan processing and credit risk would have a good appreciation for kind of why those risks matter, right? Being able to explain what went into the models. So I when I was at McKinsey, I actually ran a pretty big study to estimate earlier, this was 4 years ago probably, to estimate early on the kind of operational and algorithmic risk associated with AI. And we've gone through a few of those, but it's important to think, well, yes, those are the risks. There's privacy risk, there's output risk, there's misclassification risk, there's a lot of others kind of layers in there. But if we think about what can we do to mitigate and manage and have responsible AI, and responsible AI meaning controlling for those risks, controlling for the negative outputs. And what we're seeing firms like Amazon do is we have something called guardrails in Amazon Bedrock. Bedrock is our kind of product to explore and create foundational models and build in additional data. But we literally have a service on top of that called guardrails, right? That really manages who can see what data will be consumed and used by the models. What will the outputs look like? Are there biases in the outputs that we need to control for, right? So I think you're going to see more investments in companies kind of managing towards responsible AI as it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and we kind of get over these initial, speed bumps, if you will, before we get to full-blown, AI adoption.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. Is that I hope the takeaway here that everyone's listening to is that AI does provide value. And clearly, we've tried to give the quantitative metrics of the value can provide you in your business. It is rapidly growing, rapidly changing, but there's still a lot that we don't know or can't really trust. So really quickly, I want to pause for a second, maybe do a quick poll with the audience. So maybe quickly, if you could answer, where you might be experiencing the highest fear of implementing AI within your organization. So let's take a few seconds there. While people are answering, I know that I've heard so many different stories of, the good, the bad, the ugly of AI, both in the financial services space and just all around of really, is your data accurate? Are you getting the information you need and more? Okay, we see some results coming in. Looks like regulatory compliance, some cybersecurity, ethical integration of legacy systems. Okay. All good responses. Continue to fill in the poll. We're going to move forward because what we really want to transition to with this information is how you can provide more security, more trust, and lower that risk of using AI in your workflows throughout your business. Because what we really believe is that if you can start to pair document automation, something that does provide more security, more accuracy throughout that process, and pair that with AI and what it can do for your business, this is really a positive pairing that's going to allow you to, really answer a lot of the things you just put in that poll. How do you integrate in your existing systems? How do you lower risk, prevent cybersecurity issues, and more? Because we think really at a high level, 3 benefits that document automation can provide in your AI workflows is that enhance accuracy and security. You can help automate those full workflows alongside AI and really smarter analysis of that data. So with this information that we're now giving our attendees, I'd love to turn it back to our subject matter experts here. Suman, how have you seen organizations harness this ability to enhance accuracy and security, and how's that translated to more profitable growth for their businesses?
Yeah, so if you look at some of the 3 areas that I touched upon earlier, Brad, right? One of the important document processing plays a critical part in the entire customer onboarding, as well as the middle office functions, right? And what we are seeing is the process of the document generation, the classification is an integral part in across the spectrum of the banking operations. And this will help drive the customer experience, improve the accuracy of the statements and the disclosures that banks provide to the customers, and help with the compliance, right? For example, in the mortgage industry, right, there's a lot of documents which are scanned images. For example, sometimes the borrowers are uploading documents like the tax return statements, which might be scanned images. Gen AI can extract the data from the borrower documents, right, and thereby reducing the amount of time taken to do a manual data entry, thereby not only reducing the time but also improving the accuracy of the whole process, right? And speeds up the whole processing time. Second, I think where it comes in, it's not just the ingestion of the data, but also in terms of the data that it is collecting, and it can drive some of the decisions from the unstructured data that the banks and the lenders are gathering during the interaction with the customers, right? So, for example, many of the interactions with the customers could be in the form of texts or emails or chats, and the Gen AI could look at many of these interactions to enable the borrowing pattern, identify any potential risks of default on the loans, and help make a better decision in terms of either the pricing, the way the loans are being priced, or the loans are being regulated, right? And the third aspect is the compliance with the regulatory standards. When the documents are getting generated, for example, the statements and disclosures, right? Does it comply with the good faith estimates, for example, in the mortgage industry, or does it comply with the RESPA Act, right? So I think these are some of the use cases that we are seeing, many of the lenders and the banks, start to experimenting with and already rolling out many of these features in many of these spaces.
Thank you. And yeah, all good points. If we're shifting slightly, Anthony, if we're talking about workflow automation or automating workflows throughout your business, can you maybe give a bit of color of what value that provides?
Yeah. So, like under the covers, beyond our products, beyond kind of the business use cases that we're focusing on, there's 3 core capabilities that I've been exposed to with AI. First is kind of identification. The second is verification. And the third is generation, doing something with the data in that context. I think from what I've learned is that no executive believes that technology nor AI by itself is bulletproof. So workflow has elements really in 2 contexts. One, in governing a contextual process between parties. That could be, as I used the example before, applying smart functionality to providing statements to consumers and consuming the intelligence around that interaction. That could be extracting terms and conditions from contracts, understanding their exposure and risk, and providing it to the right attorneys or procurement officials. But what it always does, based on certain thresholds of impact, is provide checks and balances to allow somebody, a human, to oversee what the tech is doing. And that's really, really important. So Conga has taken a very enterprise view of workflows to say not only can AI enable us to be agile in how our products are deployed, but it also can allow us to be controlled and smart to ensure that for our customers, there's an overlying sense of governance that technology is not just going to go crazy by itself.
Yeah, I really appreciate the point of the balance of utilizing the machines, utilizing the technology, but also still keeping that kind of human intervention in the loop to double check this rapidly changing landscape. David, what about you? So in terms of this intelligent analysis, how have you seen AI leverage market trends or industry insights to aid in analyzing this data or really improve that customer experience?
Sure. We've seen a couple of pretty interesting emerging use cases that blend things like Gen AI along with retrieval augmented generation to add to the existing foundation model. So if I think about what I would call AI assisted document automation and kind of what that means for a bank and kind of what does it allow you to do. I would use one example that I use a lot when I talk with banks, and that is banks traditionally are really good at understanding absolute performance. You don't need models to understand, my deposits grew 5% last quarter, right? That's not model generated, that's outputs of real life stuff, right? But is 5% good? Well, you could say it was good because we targeted for 3 and we got 5. Great. But what if the market grew 10? Right? And then you don't look as good. So how do we kind of bridge that gap? So if I think about in banking, right, there are call reports that every bank in the U.S. has to submit. I think it's quarterly, and those reports contain a bunch of information that would be super useful to banks to understand kind of their performance relative to peers. So you could think about a process where, let's say we have an insights engine in a bank, and that you're going to interact with that through a typical natural language processing, and you're going to, we'd be able to say how fast did deposits grow or decline last quarter? Great. How do I compare to the industry? And what you're going to have is an underlying. You're going to have a foundation model. So now you're going to augment, you're going to reach out and pull that data from either your existing call reports, but probably more interesting from all the publicly available call report information that is out there that's already organized right around how you would want to kind of see comparisons. So I see, again, Gen AI opening up those types of avenues to really getting a truer picture of business performance to improve planning going forward.
Yeah, and I think absolutely there's this natural pairing, and that's what we're trying to hopefully get across to our attendees is that Gen AI can help, generate these documents that might perform better, or you might get better analytics and better data to help drive your decision making, your processes, your workflows, and provide that better customer experience. And then pairing it with arguably accuracy and automation is what's really important here. I think all of us have heard the horror stories, even with basic Gen AI capabilities, of kind of the wrong information being populated. And in something that is so regulated as the banking space, where you need to make sure that the right people are accessing the right data and the right documents at the right time, and that the wrong information being shared could be fairly catastrophic to a firm or bank, it's really important to make sure that information is accurate, is being shared. So knowing these 3 ways to maximize really your AI initiatives, as you start to look and saying, how can I invest in AI? How can I help this improve my workflows? I'd love to apply this into what you should expect, really with pairing it with a document automation pairing to making sure you're generating the right documents, you're collecting compliance signatures, and what that can look like. So if your organization doesn't have really document automation tools in tandem with whatever you're doing, you might be experiencing some of these pain points that we'll cover in just a second of, really, where's your data coming from? Can it populate your documents accordingly? Can you generate really any document type? A lot of times, different data is being put into different documents, being shared with different clients at different times in that sales cycle. How can you make sure that's accurate? How can you make sure the documents are being delivered wherever a customer expects? If we're getting in a conversation about customer experience, really making sure that things can be self-service, things can be automated, things can be on demand. How do we make sure that's as seamless as possible? And making sure that not only generating the right document for the right time for whether internal use cases or for your clients is seamless, but also you can collect those legally compliant signatures as well, integrate it into your portals, into your websites, into your applications and more, and really provide that best brand experience as possible. Because we know in the banking and financial services space, really providing that customer experience is so vital. So with all that information, I'm sure some of you say, I want to invest in AI. I want to really help this with my workflows, provide a better experience, but I need it to be accurate. So let's talk about really that current state and the ideal state you might have. Let's go to our thought leaders. Anthony, give us some of your input of what your thoughts are so far.
I just wanted to unmute, sorry. I just want to kind of bring this back to the survey and the results. Take notice to the fact that nobody on this call selected cost as a critical factor. And kind of as I spoke to before, what's resonating with me most is that leaders and business leaders, CFOs, CLOs, CPOs, are turning towards AI to help manage bottom line costs. And they're doing so at significance. As it relates to DocGen, I think it's easy for anybody to understand, can AI help me in commercial banking use cases create contracts and customize proposals? Of course it can. Can AI help me manage and mitigate statements and documentation that investors are required? But think about this also, to commercial banking use cases and creating proposals and documentation and appending terms and making content relevant not only to a commercial banking customer, but also geographically appropriate based on language, terms and conditions, the way you operate. There's a lot of nuance to significant commercial banking that needs to be considered. And Conga has brought forth a lot of technology and a lot of AI horsepower to de-risk the way you do business between companies and enterprises. That stuff is really, really important. The key message, though, is that technology can not only deliver on these capabilities, but through speed and control can be self-sustaining, can do a heck of a lot more for a heck of a lot less. That's my point of view.
Yeah, point taken. And I think that's great to tie it into really the cost factor. Great insights. What about David? What about you? What would you consider ideal state?
Yeah, if I go back to the discussion about regulatory and compliance, I mean, obviously that was fairly highly rated on in the poll. I think an ideal state is one in which, look, with a single pane of glass, right, we can have control over data access, we can see data lineage, we can see who's used the data and what data have been used and which types of models. We could see even cost, right? How often are models running? How many outputs are there? But we need to have, more control, more visibility. We're in a great state right now, right, where we're still kind of, beginning to grow. And if you think about what I need to be able to manage that all with a single pane of glass, because what I don't want to have happen, right, is let's roll out AI and we have a new credit decisioning model and it looks great and it's accurate. And then we apply it and we find out, look, it's biased, right? It's overly indexing on a group that's a certain age or, in a certain geography, et cetera, right? Those models cannot, they're non-compliant. You get FCRA fines that can be very, very hefty, right? So although we're not worried necessarily about the cost of AI in terms of technical cost, there's a lot of cost if you get it wrong. And we're just at that state now where we can identify what those risks are and begin controlling them. And the other piece that I think AI is going to really help, and data in general, is what I call closing the loop, closing that feedback loop. So let's say we have a model that predicts that you should offer mortgages to this group of customers. We set up test controls. We find out that our control group, open mortgages at half the rate of our test. And then we say, look, the model is interesting. Now, but most banks still struggle with, okay, let's feed that back into the models again, that feedback loop, and have kind of self-generating AI methods. I'm not going to say AI itself, but surrounding methods are allowing us to control for that a lot better and to better link, I'd say, results back with the decisions we took. So we know what the true ROI is of, offer of our mortgage campaign or lending campaign or whatever it happens to be. So, maintaining visibility across all of those things is what kind of is top of mind for me, and what I hear a lot working with our customers and our partners as well.
For sure, thank you. And Suman, from the technical aspect, what does ideal state look like to you?
I think, Brad, what we are seeing is, when we, are talking to our customers to see how and where they can adopt Gen AI and scale the implementation, right? What we are discovering is, that the organizations would most benefit, if they were to take a domain-centric approach towards, mapping the benefits of Gen AI with the capabilities they have internally with the organizations. And in the polls that we saw, along with cybersecurity, the integration of the Gen AI with the legacy systems is becoming critical. So, the bank may have some capabilities which lie in a system which is probably not, open sourced or not API driven. So, how do you overcome those challenges by creating a map of the business capabilities with respect to the benefits that Gen AI can offer? I think, it is important for the organizations to have that mapping and apply the risk assessment. In our engagement so far, we have developed our own proprietary risk assessment frameworks, through which, organizations can understand the exposure of the data and the value of the investments that it can bring in when implementing the Gen AI. I think these are the two critical aspects. The other thing I want to touch upon is, where we are seeing the banks drive value is, we see, mostly two types of, documents, structured and unstructured, right? And while we have a defined mechanism in terms of how you ingest the structured documents, the unstructured documents is where we have seen most banks struggle because there is no defined, template across the nationally. For example, a property deed could look very different in California than it can look in New York, for example, right? And I think, machine learning techniques have been used, templatize those. But I think the value of Gen AI lies in being able to understand and define those templates, on a real-time basis. So I think, that's, where, we are seeing some of these, Gen AI techniques being applied, to help, help the models learn on their own to be able to ingest newer type of document templates, right? And I think that becomes critical in terms of how you are applying those technologies in this area.
Yeah,
right?
for
And
sure.
yeah.
What I want to also be sure to leave time to maybe do another poll, because we've gotten all of your insights, but would love to turn it over now to our attendees. Where do you see the biggest opportunity to leverage AI in that document workflow? Is it kind of the manual document creation? Is it standardization? Is it embedding in your systems? I see immediately people clicking embedding in systems, document. Yeah. What we're looking at here is really, time as people are starting to input, lack of secure audit trail to meet compliance. We actually have an interesting story that we can share in a few minutes about really the importance of audit trail and compliance in this industry as well. But yeah, seeing different answers of really what AI, what automation can help do to help expedite these workflows and provide accuracy and provide really that better customer experience and more. So thank you all for that. Now let's start to wrap things up. We talked at the very, very beginning about really calculating that business impact. We've had a lot of thoughts, a lot of great insights from our thought leaders, and you should have a good understanding by now of what AI can't and can't do for your business. But how is this going to translate to a business impact? How is this going to translate to ROI? So taking that AI lens, taking that document automation lens to really automate these workflows, let's go through how we really like to calculate that true business impact together. We're really looking at 5 factors here. So we're looking at really how many documents are you creating in a year? We gave example Claire here. Maybe she generates 5,000 loan agreements, and that's just one document type. We know that in this space, you might be, collecting dozens, if not hundreds of different document types for your customers. The average time it takes to generate those documents, we saw based on those, the survey inputs, that a lot of people are worried about the time it takes for that manual document creation. How many data sources are you pulling from? Is it, one CRM? Is it one ERP? Is it one portal that might be custom? Or, what is your system of record? How many signatures are you capturing in a year? And how many people throughout your team are creating and sending these documents? Because then that time, the ROI costs can multiply. So you see Claire in these examples are using all these different CRMs, these different data sources. They're collecting different signatures, creating different documents and more. So a lot is being done across this hypothetical line of business, and you're probably thinking to yourself, how much time, how much cost is that saving for me? And what you're seeing is actually, if you go to the next slide, is we can provide a lot of really cost savings. In this example, Claire might be saving 300,000 minutes per year across her line of business. We're looking at $250,000, in cost for document generation alone, almost the cost of 2.5 full-time employees. And we're seeing that she could save about $240,000 a year, almost 300,000 minutes. And even depending on the e-signature tool you're using, saving up to 30%. So big cost savings here that you can realize by investing in the right tools across your business to really help save you money. So I want to pass it over to our speakers one last time. Suman, you talked about really the value of striking that balance between human resources, technology resources. Can you talk about how these factors kind of can come together?
Yeah, see, as we were discussing before, Brad, I think, the next 2-3 years is what we see as the cautious experimentation phase for most of the organizations, right? We think that around 10 to 15% of the organizations are going to adopt AI in a significant way. And, and with use cases that are low in risk, but manageable in scope, right? However, we feel that this phase is going to lay the foundation on which, the next phase is going to get springboarded, right? The next phase is what we call the confident adoption, where we anticipate around 50% of the businesses to adopt Gen AI, right? But for any organizations or any environment to scale up, right, there is going to be some impact to the people jobs that are getting done today, right? The integration of the Gen AI into the business will lead to some amount of restructuring in the operating model in terms of, how people are generating and using the AI, right? And there is a need for, continuous learning and adaptability as the Gen AI adopts, right? So what we are seeing is, if you look at the earlier workforce, it was primarily based on skills or tasks that a knowledge worker could perform. What we are seeing now is the fundamental shift in using Gen AI to deliver or augment the capabilities of a knowledge worker. So we feel that from a skill-based, the workforce is going to go towards a function-based role, where they will be leveraging Gen AI to deliver certain outcomes rather than, being limited to specific tasks. And I think, that's where we see, fundamentally the shift happening. And what we are seeing is, there are use cases, while AI can improve the efficiencies, there are examples, where Gen AI cannot replace, humans. For example, the loan processing, while Gen AI can automate some parts of the loan processing, there will be nuances where the human loan officers are essential for, complex interactions, and that could drive a better customer experience. So I think the Gen AI needs to be used as a tool to augment the capability and the outcome and the accuracy of the different user roles that we are seeing in this space.
Thanks, Suman. And Anthony, we obviously gave a hypothetical perspective here on this ROI. And can you give it maybe a customer example or something you've experienced yourself through this process of someone who might have seen, this calculated approach of ROI?
Yeah. So, a couple of use cases, right? First and foremost, I'll talk about a large commercial bank where, they employ 6,000 sales reps whose laser focus is wealth management and retirement. And those 6,000 reps are generating on average about 700 contracts a month, a significant portfolio of business. Customers, as I said before, are entitled to real-time statements of their portfolios when asked for. This client is using Conga's Composer capabilities to, on demand, create, deliver, and audit the receipt of statements as needed across reps and customers real time. It, for them, offers an adoption rate of our technology at 98%, and a huge ROI by way of regulatory compliance and the avoidance of fines. Huge benefit. Another example I'll give is relative to kind of the contracting process and our ability to kind of understand relationships between buyer and supplier, and to understand and consume red lines and edits, and to manage the change process back and forth by making recommendations for change or leveraging intelligence to better negotiate an outcome. We've done this for clients across a spend portfolio of as much as $6 billion and 90,000 contracts, delivering a multi-1,000% ROI to this customer. So technology can pay for itself. I'm going to land kind of where I started, which is the audience and stakeholders are shifting away from IT and towards business. And our call to action is to simplify our messaging against something which is very, very technical, and to apply it to something that can generate a self-sustaining outcome.
Can you really share how this translates to the customer experience? Because it sounds like accuracy, speed, security are these real key takeaways here, but we'd love your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, on the customer experience side, that's a pretty deep discussion we can get into. But I think what is most exciting about AI and kind of document automation and kind of AI-assisted document creation of insights is continuing to get that customer experience more personalized, right? So you don't get the same offer every month from your bank. You don't, you get products and services tailored to more of what your goals are, whether it's, college or whatever it happens to be. So I think continuing to improve that personalization wheel is going to be super important. Now, security is always been a job one, right? And so we want to make sure we're always maintaining complete kind of control and visibility over all of our data. But if you think about, on the customer side, again, a customer is going to benefit from, shorter wait times in terms of servicing, where you can employ a chat bot. You're going to have faster loan processing times. So the ultimately, right, the customer is going to see a lot of the upside from our advancements, which I'm really excited about. I've worked in that area for a really long time, and I think applying Gen AI is really going to change what we can do and the insights we can drive in banking. So, super excited about that, and looking forward to it.
Perfect. Thank you, David. As we move towards the close, I do want to take a few seconds here. Actually, if we could pull up the Q&A, because I know we had a question from one of our attendees. I would love to address that. Looks like the question says, does the panel foresee Gen AI or AI being deployed primarily in private cloud versus public cloud, given the security of data in air while shifting to stored in public cloud? It seems like a good question for Suman. Would you mind addressing that?
Sure, yeah, Brad. I think, see, most of the organizations, while there is definitely, a big concern around the data privacy and security, I think, many of them are operating under the guardrails that either AWS or Azure offer, when they're consuming the services on the cloud, right? So while there are pros and cons to both the benefits, but, the early adopters, we are seeing, experiment using the cloud, the models deployed on the cloud because of the maturity of the models that AWS or Azure or Google offers, right? That is the benefit we are seeing. The on-prem versions are limited to what a large language model like Llama could offer, right? But when you go to the cloud, you have additional options with Azure, with ChatGPT, with Claude, with AWS, and Google's own version, right? So I think the options open up when you go to the cloud. I think what is important is to understand, what type of data you are using to train the large language models on the cloud and limit your exposure. I think, while during the training, I think David touched upon this, responsible AI framework. We have developed 7 principles of our own as well, which is in line with what Azure or AWS also recommends. And I think one is operating within the guardrails of the security frameworks, and also, using sanitized data, masking to, train the models. When it only comes to fine tuning the models at the later stages, the actual data, we recommend using the actual data. We can limit the exposures in terms of how you train it. So Namita, I don't know if that answers the question. Yes. That's my thought on that.
Perfect. Thank you, Suman. I want to thank all of our speakers here. All of you provided a different perspective. All of you provided lots of insights into really this rapidly evolving and changing industry and this trend in artificial intelligence that we're continuing to learn how to utilize and pair it with things that allow our businesses to be more secure, more compliant, more automated, and provide that better customer experience. I want to thank you all for attending. We have a lot of really takeaways right here. You'll see here in the, if you want to learn more about really Conga for banking, if you want a recap of that first webinar that we had about our banking masterclass #1, if you want to register for other upcoming Conga events and webinars, we're doing really a series on banking and different technology trends and how you can really provide, gain that revenue advantage for both yourselves and your clients as well. If you want a demo of some of our document automation solutions to generate better, accurate, faster documents that you can embed directly in your portals and websites, that's something we can do as well. We also encourage you to connect with our speakers. If you want to meet with David, Suman, Anthony, myself, feel free to connect with us. Feel free to ask us questions. We are here as a resource. Obviously, we have backgrounds at Cognizant, AWS, Conga, all of us providing different perspectives that might help you and or your business. So we just really wanted to thank you all for your time. And as a reminder, you'll be getting some follow-up emails with this recording, as well as a invite for you to fill out your own ROI calculator. Find out in what ways you and your business could really be saving money in the document automation space that, frankly, you can also reinvest into artificial intelligence. Pair these two together to really maximize your internal and external experience. So once again, thank you, Suman. Thank you, David. Thank you, Anthony. I'm Brad. We appreciate having you here, and we will speak to you soon.